80,000 people chanted his name every Saturday afternoon. He was the most gifted footballer of his generation. The goals, the contracts, the magazine covers, the kind of career that boys from Dublin dreamed about on school pitches, and almost none of them ever reached. Kyle Dupree had reached it. He had everything. And he owed it all to the wrong people. Because Kyle Dupree had a gambling problem. And the people he now owed money to were not the kind who sent polite letters. They were the kind who showed up at your door. And they had found his address. Welcome to Corporate Chaos Scandals, the place for the most shocking and unbelievable workplace confession stories. From office drama to hidden secrets, nothing is off limits. Before we get into this, make sure you subscribe and like, because we bring you stories like this every week. His name is Kyle Dupree, born in Dublin, Ireland. The third of 4 children in a family where football was the language and the ambition. And, for Kyle's father, who had been a semi-professional player in his 20s before a knee injury had ended that particular dream. Something that sat between pride and hope in a way that is very specific to certain sporting families. Kyle was scouted at 15 by a youth academy, associated with a major European club. He was signed at 17. He played his first professional match at 18. He was a household name, not in Ireland only, but across the European football landscape, by 22. A forward with the kind of ability that coaches and analysts describe by reaching for language that sounds more like art criticism than sports analysis. He read the game ahead of everyone else. He scored goals that replays couldn't entirely explain. The body making decisions faster than the conscious mind was tracking them, the ball ending up in positions that looked, in retrospect, inevitable, and had been, in the moment, impossible. He was, at the height of this story, 27 years old, playing for one of the most historic football clubs in European football, earning, including bonuses and commercial agreements, approximately 15 million euros per year. He had 800,000 euros left. The rest, the 14 years of salary, the signing bonuses, the commercial income, the cumulative earnings of a decade at the elite level of the best paid sport in the world, was gone. Spent, lost, wagered away in the specific accelerating, compounding disaster of a gambling addiction that had taken root at 21 and grown, without meaningful interruption, for 6 years. And the reason the remaining 800,000 was also at risk was because Kyle Dupree owed 2.4 million euros to a criminal organisation that had, 3 weeks prior, formally run out of patience. They had delivered a message, not a phone call, not an email, a physical piece of paper in a sealed envelope pushed through the letterbox of his home address at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday night. The letterbox of an address they should not have had. The message was 6 words: pay us or face the consequences. Kyle sat on his kitchen floor with that piece of paper in his hands and understood, with the specific clarity that comes when something you have been avoiding in a peripheral way finally moves to the center, exactly how far he had fallen and exactly how serious this had become. The gambling had started the way it starts for most people in Kyle's position, gradually, socially, in a way that felt more like entertainment than compulsion. Cards after training. The natural competitive environment of a dressing room full of elite athletes who had been wired since childhood to compete in every available context. Small stakes at first, 20 euros, 50. The scale of the numbers irrelevant to men earning the kind of money they were earning. It was the game that mattered, the winning. Kyle was good at cards. He had the fast brain, the spatial awareness, the ability to read people under pressure that made him exceptional on a football pitch and made him, in a card game, consistently formidable. He won often. He enjoyed winning. He began to seek out contexts where winning was available at higher stakes. Online platforms came next, legal, licensed, operating in the grey zones of European gaming regulation. Sports betting, not his own sport, he was not that reckless, or not yet. Other leagues, other sports, boxing, basketball, the kind of action that was available 24 hours a day and required nothing more than a phone and an account. He won enough in the early stages to embed the belief. This is the specific cruelty of gambling addiction in its early phases. It rewards. Not consistently, not sustainably, but enough to build the architecture of a conviction that skill is involved, that this is something the right person with the right instincts can master. Kyle Dupree had mastered the most physically and technically demanding sport on earth. The idea that he could not master this with his intelligence and his pattern recognition and his competitive drive did not seem unreasonable to him. He could not. It was not masterable. But it took him 4 years and millions of euros to understand this with any kind of permanence. The organised element arrived in the form of a man he met at a private event in year 3 of his gambling career, well-dressed, articulate, the kind of easy, polished manner that reads as sophistication until you understand that it is actually a professional tool deployed toward a specific purpose. This man described himself as an investment consultant with interests in private gaming circles. He told Kyle that serious money was made by serious people in private, curated environments that were qualitatively different from the public platforms. He offered access. Kyle joined. He lost in the first 3 months more than he had in the previous year on the public platforms. And then, because the private circle operated on credit, because you could place bets against a line of credit to be settled later, he kept going, trying to recover what he had lost, trying to get back to even. The oldest, most documented mistake in the history of problem gambling, made by a man who understood enough about strategy and competition to believe that getting back to even was a matter of time and effort rather than a structural impossibility. The credit accumulated interest. The interest accumulated faster than the bets recovered. The circle that had seemed curated and prestigious began to reveal itself for what it actually was. A debt trap operated by people who were not interested in his winnings and were very interested in his debt. By the time Kyle understood who he was actually dealing with, not investment consultants, not sophisticated private operators, but a criminal organization with fingers in multiple illegal enterprises and a particular interest in the leverage that athlete debt provided, the number had reached 2.4 million euros. And the options available to a man in that position had narrowed to something very small indeed. The phone call came on a Tuesday evening. Kyle was at home. The club had a training session the following morning. He was watching footage from the previous match, which was the kind of evening work that serious players at serious clubs do as a matter of course. His personal phone rang. A number he did not recognize. The voice on the other end was calm. Professionally calm. The way certain people are calm is a deliberate choice rather than a natural state. The voice said, "Mr. Dupree, we are calling about your outstanding account balance." Kyle said nothing. The voice gave the number, 2.4 million euros. It gave a deadline, 30 days. And then it described, in language that was measured and precise and entirely clear in its implications, what the consequences of non-payment would look like. Kyle said he did not have 2.4 million euros liquid. The voice said, "Then we have an alternative we would like to discuss." The alternative was explained across the following 30 minutes with a patience and a thoroughness that told Kyle this was not a conversation being improvised. This was a script. He was not the first person to receive it. The proposal was match influence, not full fixing. That, the voice explained, was too visible and too heavily monitored by the integrity units of the governing bodies. Influence, subtle influence, a yellow card received at a specific moment in a specific match. A penalty missed, not conspicuously, not in a high-profile cup tie where misses attracted scrutiny, but in the right moment in the right match where individual performance variation was the natural explanation, small enough to be deniable, frequent enough to be valuable. They would track his debt against the value of the influence provided. They had a formula. Kyle said, "I won't do that." The voice said, "Mr. Dupree, we know your parents' address in Dublin. We know your sister's address. We know the school your nephew attends." Kyle said nothing for a long time. The voice said, "Take a few days to think about it." The call ended. Kyle sat in his living room with the television still on and the match footage still playing and tried to understand what he was going to do next. He did not call the police immediately. He needs to be understood in that failure, not excused by it. The failure came from fear and from shame in approximately equal measure. The fear was physical and specific, and they knew his nephew's school. He had a clear and visceral understanding of what that meant. The shame was different, broader. The shame of a man earning 15 million euros a year who had managed to arrive in a position where criminals had leverage over him. The shame of the explanation, of his parents finding out, of the club finding out, of the 80,000 people finding out. He sat with it for 48 hours. He went to training. He performed. He said nothing to anyone. On the Thursday, he drove to Dublin. He did not tell his family why. He sat in his parents' house and ate his mother's food and played in the back garden with his nephew for an hour, and watched the 6-year-old run after the ball with the kind of complete, uncomplicated joy that only children and the very lucky have access to. He drove back on Friday morning. He sat in his car outside his house for 20 minutes. Then he called Fergal. Fergal Doyle was his agent. 51 years old. He had been with Kyle since Kyle was 17, had been the first professional to see in him not just a talented young player, but the specific combination of talent and character that produces a significant career. He was not an emotionally effusive man. He was steady and clear-headed and had, across 17 years of representing professional athletes, encountered a comprehensive range of complicated situations. He listened to the full account without interrupting: the gambling, the private circle, the debt, the call, the 30-minute conversation, the proposal, the mention of the nephew's school. When Kyle finished, Fergal was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Kyle, I need you to hear something, and I need you to hear it completely. The moment you touch a single result, the moment you do one thing they're asking, it is over. Not the season, not the contract, everything. Career over, because the first fix is the evidence they use to own you forever. And they will use it. You will never be free of it. Do you understand what I'm saying?" Kyle said, "They know where my nephew goes to school." Fergal said, "I know, which is precisely why we go to the authorities. Not next week, not after the match. Today. We call today." The meeting with law enforcement happened within 36 hours of Fergal's call. A joint operation involving the football governing body's integrity unit and national organised crime investigators. Kyle arrived with Fergal and a lawyer who specialised in exactly these situations. He told them everything, every call, every message, every conversation from the man at the private event onwards. He handed over his phone. He handed over the financial records that showed the development of the debt. He identified the number the call had come from. He signed a cooperation agreement. In exchange, and this was the first thing Fergal had negotiated before the meeting, protective measures were put in place for his family in Dublin within 24 hours. His parents were contacted by authorities and given specific guidance. The school was notified through appropriate channels. Kyle called his parents that evening and told them everything. His mother did not speak for a long time. His father said, "You should have come to us months ago." Kyle said, "I know, duh." His father said, "But you came now. That's the part that matters." The investigation took 9 months. It identified a match-fixing network operating across 4 European leagues with athlete debt as its primary recruitment mechanism. 17 individuals associated with the network were arrested across 3 jurisdictions. Kyle Dupree was identified formally as a cooperating witness whose information had been central to the investigation. His club was informed. The conversation with his manager was, Kyle has said, the second hardest conversation of his life after the one with his parents. His manager listened to everything. Then he asked, very directly, "Did you ever touch a result?" Kyle said, "No, not once. I refused and I cooperated. I have documentation of both." His manager was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Then here is what we are going to do." The club's response was, in truth, better than Kyle had allowed himself to hope for. They covered his legal costs. They arranged for him to meet with a gambling addiction specialist who had worked with professional athletes specifically. Someone who understood the pressure environment, the accessibility of online platforms, the particular vulnerability of young men with significant disposable income and significant competitive drive. They arranged access to a therapist. They did not terminate his contract. What they did do was restructure his financial arrangements. A significant portion of his ongoing earnings was placed into a protected trust that he could not access directly. A financial advisor appointed by the club managed his personal finances for 2 years. He was given a monthly living allowance. He is 27 years old, earning 15 million euros a year on a monthly allowance. He has spoken about this with the dark humour of a man who understands the irony completely and accepts it as the appropriate consequence of having demonstrated over 6 years that direct access to his own money was not something he could be trusted with at that point in his life. The debt. The criminal proceedings against the organisation included the seizure of assets. Kyle's outstanding debt was dissolved through the legal process as part of the prosecution outcome. He paid nothing, not to the organisation, not directly. The law handled that part. He has not placed a bet since the night he sat on his kitchen floor with the piece of paper in his hands. He attends a recovery group for professional athletes dealing with gambling addiction. It meets on Wednesday evenings. He does not talk about it publicly yet. Not in detail, not with names. But those who know him say that he talks about it privately with the deliberateness of someone who understands that the alternative to talking is the silence where the problem used to live. He still plays. He still scores. He had his best goals per game ratio in the season following the investigation. His manager attributed it publicly to maturity and focus. Kyle, in a private conversation with Fergal, said he thought it was more specific than that. He was playing now with a clarity he hadn't had in years, because the thing that had been sitting in the back of his mind for 6 years, the debt, the shame, the weight of the secret, was gone. And without the weight of it, the game felt the way it had felt when he was 15 years old on a school pitch in Dublin, with nothing to lose and everything to play for. The 80,000 people still chant his name on Saturday afternoons. He hears them differently now, not as a sound that confirms what he is, as a reminder of what he almost threw away because he didn't ask for help soon enough. That is the story of Kyle Dupree, the world-class footballer, the gambling addiction, the criminal network, and the moment he finally made the right call. Drop a comment below. Did he do the right thing by cooperating with authorities? Should the club have stood by him? And what do you think governing bodies need to do to protect athletes from exactly this kind of targeting? This is a conversation worth having. Get into the comments. And if you are not subscribed to Corporate Chaos Scandals, come on now, hit that subscribe button, like this video, share it. We are here every week with stories that go deeper than the surface. I'll see you in the next one.